This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. Greeting, Mr. Dahl.
Greetings.
How was your Stravinsky for full concert last
Oh,
night?
so yeah. Oh, fucking. Aegon is
Didn't perform it. You went to see it, by
I
the
went. I,
way.
I went to the New York City Ballet in Lincoln Center, and my buddy Dan Peck is in the orchestra, plays tuba. We should actually have
No,
him
it's
on
one of my
sometime.
favorite instruments.
It's a badass instrument, but anyhow, in short, so I was talking with David Earl Button, who's been on the show a few months ago, and we were talking about one of the late Stravinsky pieces, Aegon, 1954, and it's a ballet. It's an orchestral piece accompanying a ballet, and just out of a hunch, maybe it was intuition, I texted Dan Peck and go, "Hey, because this thing's never fucking played. It's a 25-minute piece, so if you're bored in such an environment, which most people are, it's like, don't worry, it's only fucking 25 minutes, and it's a fucking
Yeah.
badass piece." And I said, "Hey, do you guys ever play this?" And he goes, "It's funny you mentioned. We're going to be playing this in May." So I was like,
Wow.
I'm going to that fucking thing." And I've been to the Met Opera, I've been to Carnegie Hall, I'd never been to the New York City Ballet before. So this was
Must
the
admit,
whole thing was
neither
a
have
big
I.
experience. So the first piece was Fancy Free, which is this Bernstein piece, which is just kind of populist crap. Bernstein was a great conductor, he was a great public figure, he was a great pianist, but his compositions, it's kind of like Broadway, and it should have been on Broadway. It's just too low class for that. But these are some of the best dancers in the world's doing it. But that was just for like the normies, and I was like, whatevs. The second piece was Aegon, which was so spectacular. See, I'm not fine. The lowest common denominator choreographed dancing, like say MTV dancing for pop stars, or the Chinese introduction to the Olympics, or even figure skating, all this unison. Well, that's boring for me after a while. I like things that are a little more complicated, and all the contrapuntal, all the polyphony, all the stuff with Stravinsky, all the variation, all the odd meters. You have these dancers so in sync with this stuff. I mean, it is so difficult. And then also getting the perspective, because I was on one of the balconies, the shapes and the silhouettes. So they have these really exotic formations. I mean, I'm still thinking about this.
Well, that's amazing.
It
Well,
was
and look,
such a
and
fucking
let's
experience.
in a very different vein. I
Sure.
mean, and only witnessing it secondhand via some video clips. I mean, it's understandable why, in a very different vein, you're very excited when you're performing with a Zumi, Buto extraordinaire, wild lights,
It,
wild music.
I mean,
And it's beyond, I mean, it's something in a completely different vein, but I totally
well, the
understand
thing
where.
with her, and why it kind of works. People have these like handheld videos, and that with almost everything when they put it on YouTube, it's like, oh god, that doesn't really capture it. With her, it kind of still translates, because she works out every day. I mean, just every millimeter, all these almost unnatural positions that are very conscious to these
Well, and also
silhouettes.
because
They're
it's a more
captured.
visual thing, and there's only one instrument to try to capture correctly, as opposed to a band, which always sounds and looks terrible.
Well, there's that too. So there's the filters, the audio filters aren't like struggling and trying to interpret it, just like boom. But yes. But moving on.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
but hey, Aegon's still performing on Saturday. Unfortunately, I'm busy on Saturday, but I encourage anyone to check it out. Unfortunately, tickets are expensive, but it's an experience. All right.
all right. So I have to ask you, Tim.
Yes.
It was a short performance,
Uh-huh.
but I'm wondering on your many decades of touring, and I'm
Sure.
sure you have, but I've never witnessed it myself.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever had the need to just urinate in public?
Well, boys do that all the time.
I've done it myself, I must admit.
Yeah, and some girls will do it, but yes, of course, of
All
course,
right.
of
Well,
course.
lucky for you that you were not in Florida doing it, because there
Oh
now is
boy.
a horrifying video which shows a bloody aftermath of an alligator attack where a man, 23, had his arm bitten off by a
Oh, I
10
know
foot
about
beast
this.
when he went to relieve himself in a pond behind a Florida bar because the restroom line was too long. Now, it's unusual that the men's room line is too long, because anytime you're in an airport, the women's line is always too long. And it has caused me to occasionally go into the men's bathroom. I
Sure,
do announce, but I do
sure.
go because there's no place to go outside. So anyway, Jordan Rivera, 23, was writhing in pain on the muddy banks of a pond outside Bendito's in Port Charlotte, just north of Fort Myers, in the early
I used to live
hours of
around there.
Sunday morning. And his friend came upon him and said, "Get the fuck out of the water." The person recording him says that he was bitten by an alligator and his whole arm
Yep.
came off.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Terrifying.
Yeah. And
Well, I mean, is it better to lose an arm or a penis? I'm not sure.
maybe that was
Just
his
asking.
penis. Maybe it was actually his penis. But he's hung well. I lived for 6 months right near there in Sanibel when I was really young. And
you
there
knew
was
not to piss in a pond.
well, no, when I was there, an elderly man's arm was bitten off by a fucking alligator. He was walking his dog. It was like a corgi.
They do love the taste of dog alligators.
Well, the thing fucking launched out of the bushes or whatever, swamp bushes, and just latched on the dog. The dog's whimpering, so the guy tries to beat it off with his cane, and the fucking alligator was like, this I'd rather go after this other thing, and rip the guy's arm off. Now this guy didn't live. And I always think, what a cool way to die if you're 94 and such a primal dynamic way to go. So that guy, in a weird way, was kind of lucky to have such an exciting death after 94 years. But yeah, I read that article. People were watching from the bar, just sipping. And then they're like, oh my God, this guy's arm just got ripped off. And luckily one of the bar dudes, people drinking. Patrons. Yeah, he was
Ahmed.
Yeah, no, he was a military guy. So I think it was like Iraq or something. So he knew how to handle things like arms being blown off. Going back to the like pissing in public, when I've hung around females with vaginas, when they have no choice, they got to piss here in the woods or some kind of shit. It's not a criticism, it's an observation. Whatever is going on down there, it sounds like a fucking floodgate. It's like it's not like the stream that guys have. It's like, what the fuck is happening there?
Which is why I always advise women to carry a tissue or two, because you never know when you're going to need one. But that is true. Now, speaking of things that piss me off, however.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Now, this is just so pathetic. The majority of book ban requests that are happening now, especially in Florida, were made by only 11 people.
Of course.
11.
Of course.
So, analysis conducted by the Washington Post found that only 11 people were responsible for more than half of the 1,000 different book challenges analyzed by the paper, with one person responsible for 92 challenges just by himself.
Yep. Everyone, but this is happening on all the spectrums of politics right now. You have a few people. They're basically taking a baseball bat to a beehive of society.
Well, and excuse me, but Florida, being where not only alligators like to bite old and young people, but where one of the most authoritarian idiots rules, has just banned the poem read at the Biden inauguration after an objective objected by just one parent.
I know it's absolutely ridiculous. Well, DeSantis is taking on Disney. We'll see how that how that works out. I mean, I know he went to the elite. Idiot. He went to like Yale and Princeton, and elite schools, and he claims he's not an elitist. But he's going against a team of lawyers who went to these same schools, and I don't. Well, let's see what fucking happens. I mean, I know the NAACP. The NAACP gave a travel warning to people of color. Going to
just
Florida.
People of color and other
going to Florida. That's maybe not a safe environment to go to. And, this fucks with the money because Florida depends on its tourism economy.
Well, I mean, we'll be there in September representing the other side, shall we say.
I mean, there's DeSantis is not universally liked. So, I mean, it's right on that line. It's almost 50-50. So there's a huge population in Florida, I think, being the third or fourth most populous state. So there's a lot of people that hate his guts, and it's so unnecessary to divide the population like that.
It's just so pathetic anyway. Yeah. Well, this is interesting to me. I mean, new things found every day, but archaeologists just discover a lost world of, this blows my mind.
Sure.
417 ancient Mayan cities. 417 ancient Mayan cities.
Where?
Buried in remote jungle, connected by miles of superhighways.
Which countries?
Scientists in Guatemala
have
discovered the first freeway system in the
Yeah,
world.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the Mayans built 417 cities connected by 110 miles of super highways. So now historians just have to totally rethink
Well,
what they knew of the
there's been
Mayans.
there's been theories about this for a while, and talk about whitewashing history.
Yeah,
And when people talk about the Holocaust, I always say which fucking one, and the
exactly. Yeah.
there's a long list, and
Well, I mean,
it's
this. Yeah,
no, but the whole whitewashing of the indigenous American people
right.
history is that they're somehow primitive, and the trade routes were extremely sophisticated,
Yeah.
and well, maybe they didn't have the superior weapons, but that doesn't
Yeah.
mean shit in terms of just
Well, I
one
mean, this
sophistication.
had roads, hydraulic systems,
There
agricultural
you go.
infrastructures, and these communities actually it's on the border of Guatemala and Mexico, which by the way, okay, excuse me, let me just go on to this. So it's only accessible by helicopter and then a 40-mile hike through
Wow.
dense jaguar and snake-filled rainforest. But anyway, this is just a whole volume of human history that is being investigated now. Now, speaking of Mexico,
Hmm.
um big big volcanoes spewing right now in three different continents:
Wow.
Italy,
Wow.
Mexico, and the Democratic Republic of Congo. I didn't even know they had
Well, yeah,
volcanoes.
yeah. So, interesting. I wonder if all these different tectonic plates. I wonder it's kind of like shuffling around. I wonder
Shifting.
if they're kind of like it's just coincidence or they're triggering things. I know I'm
Well,
not a
I mean, and
geologist. I
they're
don't know.
in Mexico City, they're like preparing for possible evacuation of millions of people
Could
in
you
Mexico
imagine?
City.
I mean, the air quality in Mexico
Or
City
wow.
already is a fucking
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
goldfish bowl
Yeah.
of like
Yeah.
fucking smog. Could you
Yeah.
imagine?
Well,
Um,
and 25 million people live within a 60-mile radius of the volcano in Mexico City. And then we have, I mean, Italy is not only having massive floods, but now they're also having Mount Etna, which is,
and
shutting down a few
in
airports.
Catania, I see, so I've played Catania a bunch. And a couple of years ago, it wasn't active, but it was glowing. I remember doing like a midnight
Yeah.
swim on one of those black sand beaches, and it was like you see the silhouette, and then it's like this glowing thing. It was really spectacular. I don't know how much time you spend in Catania. I mean, we played there once, but if you go to some of the bars, that city's been covered many times throughout history. If you go to some of the bars that you can keep on going in the basement to like sit down, and then all of a sudden it'll be like a layered cake. There'll be like all this molten rock, and then you
Yeah.
go to another room, and then you go. It's really an insane
Well,
place.
right now, according to the Smithsonian Global Volcanism Program, last week, 24 volcanoes were in some stage of active eruption, which
Whoa.
is, pretty freaking terrifying.
Is this like some like distinction of the dinosaurs?
It's,
It's time. I mean,
whatever. I mean,
with global warming, that just accelerates shit considerably, I would imagine.
well, exactly. I mean, come on.
It's wow. Okay,
That's
I
just
didn't
the
realize
way it is.
I have volcanoes. I saw one a couple of years ago in Iceland, which was pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of like mountains, Tetsudo Hatanaaka, this Japanese hiker, was hiking through Denali National Park in Alaska. That's people do that. He fucking fell 1,000 feet. Now, so it couldn't have. He lived, so it couldn't have been a free fall. So it was one of these kind of like just bouncing and bouncing and bouncing.
Well, wait, down snow covered or just down a
Yeah, it was a
mountain?
glacier. It was a glacier, so it must have been icy. But this is 2 a.m. because it's still right now we're near the summer solstice. So this is like it's
Right.
still there's still sun out, right? So and he had a hiking partner, so he did it right. He didn't go solo, and who notified the park rangers, and they're storing. So it was complicated. They had to get these helicopters. So he's alive, but 1,000 feet,
Thumbelina.
1,000 feet.
Unbelievable.
Wow. Yes,
Love to
exactly.
know his thoughts on that, like 1 minute roller coaster.
I mean, I wonder how long that takes. Exactly. Just keep on bouncing.
Yeah, I wonder how fast you actually roll down 1,000. I'm
So
gonna investigate.
I don't know. So this California dad, a real do-gooder type, Um, he's like, okay, he's wants just kind of like he wants to be good. One of those people like I want to be good, not really considering much about except for its own his own self. Basically, it's a selfish act of wanting to be good. I interpret it that way. He stops all traffic in California because a mommy duck with his ducklings are crossing the street, and he's like, everyone stop, everyone stop. Well, it's fucking California, and a 17-year-old girl, I feel bad for her. She fucking mows him down, and she hasn't been arrested. He's dead. He's fucking full on dead. And it's one of those, it's like when people want to do a good act and they don't consider anything else because they want to feel good about themselves. It's sort of like when say you have 20 cars behind you and the person in front of you, and you have green lights, go, stop, still let someone cross the street. It's like, okay, you're not even reading the room. You're fucking over 20 people to help one person that didn't even ask for this.
Cause and effect. I mean, it must be measured. Now, speaking of California, this is, I think, probably one of the most horrifying stories yet on the podcast. So, and this was 3 days ago, a few days ago. Officials are investigating the mysterious disappearance of 30-ton shipment of explosive chemicals.
I heard about this
in California.
Shit. Yeah.
Ammonium nitrate, used as fertilizer, but also homemade explosives. 61,000 pounds has gone missing when it was shipped by rail from Wyoming to California last month. So they're investigating the mysterious disappearance. And, in 1995, it was used in the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yes, exactly. Yep, fertilizer, right.
Right. And on April 12th, the rail car load with 30 tons of the chemical left Cheyenne, Wyoming. And according to the incident report, the car arrived 2 weeks later at a rail shop in the Mojave Desert. It was completely empty. How the hell did it disappear from Wyoming?
That's some inside job. It has to be an inside job.
It was sealed when it left Cheyenne. It was Cheyenne. The seals were still intact when it arrived in Saltdale. And the initial assessment is that a leak, holy shit, through the bottom gate of the rail car may have developed in transit. Well, nobody seems to really know.
Well, going back to Timothy McVeigh, I mean, I don't want to sound too polarized, but the majority of American terrorism is the American right. And guess how we know? Because the American right did the fucking research. GW in 2006 wanted to go have FBI investigate terrorism. They gave a report saying, yeah, it's basically almost all basically these kind of right-wing nationalists.
Well, maybe because the left learned its lesson after mass incarceration in the 60s and early 70s.
So basically, at the time, the Republican Congress and Senate were like, we don't like these facts, and then they have this think tanks. They're like, you're basically turning us on against our own veterans and all of this fucking shit. And of course, they've also infiltrated, like neo-Nazis have infiltrated our police forces, major cities, not like little hick towns. So a lot of it comes from that. And something about the American right, they keep on using this thing about like, they think they have some kinship with our founding fathers. Like, well, the founding fathers and like Tea Party. The founding fathers were elite intellectuals. Like they would think these people are fucking trash. It's just super absurd. So let's hope that these explosives aren't in the hands of any terrorists. That'd be
or they could have leaked all the way across country. Who the hell knows? And this is also, also terrifaction. Now, our next guest, who deals with dangerous subjects himself, as not only a long-distance truck driver, which is scary from both ends of the wheel, or should we say, yes, but also investigates as an urban archaeologist who uses photography and music to create and express himself, Adel Souto. He goes to dangerous and abandoned places and records or photographs them, and has written a few books about this, and has released an industrial scape of music, sometimes using human bones, as his Memento Mori album relates. And so I'm very happy to have him as our guest, as another absolute outsider in the realm of the connective tissue that is now and forever the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch and Tim Dahl. This is the Lydian Spin with Lydia Lunch, Tim Dahl, and Adel Souto, who I consider kind of an urban archaeologist who, in his explorations, then makes music, writes books, takes photos of hidden or unexplored things. He's put out fanzines, albums, and also one of my very interesting details is he is a long distance truck driver, which makes sense on this particular episode because Tim is driving as we talk. So welcome, Adele. And
I'm not driving. I fucking parked. But anyhow, go ahead. Digress.
Thanks for having me, Lydia. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Good, good.
You know, I was looking up some of your interviews, and I was very impressed that you mentioned Zev, because I worked with Zev, and he's not really that well known in this country. Zev was an incredible percussionist, and that also you were interested to some degree by Einsturz and De Neubatten.
Oh yeah, they're probably, at least with my project 156, they're probably my two biggest influences. A little bit of Test Department and Crash Worship also.
Okay.
And this began when you were in Miami. Is that correct? Did you begin this? First of all, let's start at the very beginning. Where did you come from? You weren't born in Miami, were you?
No, I was born in Havana, Cuba. I came to the U.S. in about, I believe it was 75. Moved around a bit, finally settled in Miami. And in my teen and early 20s, I moved around a bit, but basically Miami was my home base. Did a lot of punk and hardcore bands throughout my teens, a little bit into my early 20s.
And started doing fanzines then as well, right?
Around the same time I started doing fanzines. The usual cut and paste, tabletop, stapled stuff.
So important in those days.
That's exactly. Yeah. One of the best ways to get word out about what was going on in your scene and things like that. At first, that's how my zine started. They were kind of music oriented, but then I sort of switched into I guess what you could call cultural terrorism. Talked about pranks, weird subjects, things that very few people ever discussed. A little bit of philosophy.
So it was like a punk rock. And I don't want to dilute it at all, but like an anarchist cookbook meets
exactly.
punk. Yeah, okay.
Very much so.
That still continues to the day. I really love these stickers that you have up on your site now, which is they divide us by race to rule us by class. They divide us by religion to rule us by class. They divide us by politics to rule us by class. Absolutely 100% true.
Yep. Eat the rich.
So I mean, as a Cuban, and I don't know your history, of course, a lot of the Cubans that settled in Miami were at one point rich, and then they maybe started from the ground up, and then a lot of them now are rich again.
I would say that the early migration, when like Castro first took hold, it was mostly the rich because they were losing their businesses, they were losing their property. So a lot of them came here. They started, getting involved in a lot of right-wing politics, a lot of anti-Castro stuff. But then in the early 80s, into like the Mariel boat lift, it really changed. Though at the same time, he also opened up his prisons and let a lot of them, told them that they were free to go. So you get a mix with the later moving into Florida, but basically, yes.
No. Also, but because I go down there, we probably have a lot of mutual friends. I don't know, Rat Bastard. I'm sure. I don't know. But,
I know Rat.
The whole crew down there, and one's even younger than me will have right wing wealthy parents, but they're not like that. They're actually rebelling against that now. So it's a cycle, I guess.
That's what I grew up with. I grew up with a very stern father, into a hardcore Catholic. My mom was very into whatever the man says, that type of thing. And they were both very anti-Castro. I'm extremely left-leaning. So I really separated my political philosophy from my parents, you could say.
When you first got to Miami, I guess you were like a kid, and you were a kid at that point. I mean, did you think, okay, finally I'm going to find people that I can work with, or did you feel outcast there? Because let's face it, most of the people on this podcast, ourselves all included, we're pretty much outcast anywhere. That's why we come together.
Oh, I was definitely an outcast for quite a long time. I was the only punk kid in my neighborhood. For a full probably 2 years, I was the only punk kid in my high school. It wasn't until my senior year that all of a sudden these kids in junior high discovered it, and the school was suddenly filled with almost a dozen kids. But for my sophomore and junior year, I was like the only one there. I was ostracized. I tried to still fit in. I actually joined the water polo team and the football team because I still had friends. I was an outcast in my thought and my dress, but I wasn't like picked on. I was accepted, and so since my friends joined these teams, I also did, just to for camaraderie or
How were you at water polo?
I'm actually pretty good. So
That's tough. That's tough.
The year that I joined was the first year in 2 years that we won a single game.
Oh, so you were the tipping point. You were the factor. Well, let's just say you were.
Me and a few friends, yeah.
From outsider to the water polo hero.
Yeah.
Are you still in Miami now?
No. Back in 2010, I moved to Brooklyn, and I left in 2017, and now I'm currently in Detroit.
Okay.
Understandable. Right. I mean, exiling and etc. Let's talk a bit, because this is very fascinating to me before we get back to all the different kinds of output you have, which is what very much attracted to me to you when you first, introduced yourself to me via email, because you work in photography, in writing, in music. We'll call it loosely, as I call mine loosely, music, because really It is more of a industrial, urban, musical archaeology. But when did you decide to become a long distance truck driver? First of all, I'm like, when are you going to become an ice truck driver? Ice road trucker is my favorite.
I wouldn't mind trying that out, actually.
Very dangerous.
I started in 2007. I've always had and I hate to say this, but I always kind of had a fascination and thought that joining, the trucking lifestyle would be meth and hookers. But this is a very clean industry.
It has to be now, right?
Now it is.
Yeah.
Now it is. The 70s were the golden age, right? 70s,
oh yeah,
60s were the golden age.
Yeah. You were too young to be driving then.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, I grew up on Smokey and the Bandit, BJ and the Bear, all these Convoy, all that stuff. So I kind of was like, oh, the trucking life. And there's still a lot of it that's very, in that way, but it has changed so much and it has cleaned up a lot.
Well, you can't do the California turnaround anymore, which is coast to coast to coast in 7 days. That's the amphetamine fueled 7,000 miles. That's illegal.
Right? No, the all around America, front and back. Yeah, there's no way you could do that now. But you gotta. Everything is federally mandated. You got electronic logs now. They know when your wheels are moving. It used to be paper logs, so you could you're supposed to drive 11 hours a day, or you're allowed to drive 11 hours a day. And people would fudge their logs and say they would drive 14 hours and say, yeah, I drove 11 doing 75.
Just to get the job done.
Just to get the job done.
Cook in the books. Do you think, of course, I don't know what the union thing is. I don't know what the labor forces are, but the future, drone cars, the self-driving truck, is this going to ever happen? Is this going to be the end of, say, the job of a trucker?
I believe it will, but not for a long time. I mean, they can hardly get the one with the drivers behind the wheel to drive.
Do you enjoy the isolation on the road?
I do, yes.
I could understand it, right?
Yeah.
Do you listen to a lot of radio, or do you listen to CDs?
I listen to a mix of putting shuffle on my music player and podcast. I go back and forth. It depends on the.
What's the hairiest route, or I mean, you must have you've been doing it now for more than 13 years.
16, yeah.
Yeah, so you must have had some hairy experiences on the road.
My worst one would be I got hijacked.
Oh, whoa. Horrible.
In Elizabeth, New Jersey.
Oh, okay.
You want to hear the whole story?
I want to hear it.
I do.
So I came through up US 1. I came up through a jug handle so I can then go south on US 1. Some guy came up to my window and starts mouthing, pointing to the back of my truck. And I point to my ear, telling him I can't hear you. So I lower my window a little bit. And he still mouths, pointing to the back. So I fully lowered my window, and he jumps up and puts a knife to my chest and says, "Unlock your doors." So I unlock my doors. Some other guy comes in on the passenger side and sits in the passenger seat, puts a knife to my ribs, and says, when the light turns green, which I'm turning left at a green arrow, he says, when the light turns green, turn right. So I had to cut across. When the light turns green, I go and then cut across all this traffic. He takes me into like one of the worst neighborhoods. And I'm telling him, look, man, all I have on me, I don't have any cash, and I'm just hauling paper towels. You're not going to get much but paper towels. But the truth is, it may not sound like a lot, but 1,000 rolls of paper towels, selling them at 50 cents each, that's a lot of money, even though probably
right
closer to probably 20,000 rolls. So who knows how much they could get for that. But that's not how I'm thinking. I'm thinking,
no, of course,
something worthless. And he's telling me, shut up, keep driving. So we get into this neighborhood and he tells me to pull off to the side. So I start to pull off and I notice that he is looking to the right out of my passenger side mirror. So I undo my seatbelt and I pop the brakes, which scared the hell out of him. And oh, I forgot. He also had not only a knife, but he also picked up the pen for my clipboard. So he had knife in one hand and the pen in the other, poking.
And by the way, let's just hold on the pen for a minute. People don't realize you can kill someone with a ballpoint pen in the ear.
Oh yeah.
You can also give them a tracheotomy. A ballpoint pen can be very dangerous.
So when I popped the brakes, he did this sort of jump, and I jumped out of my seat and just started belting on this guy, like pounding on him, screaming, get out of my truck, get out of my truck, over and over again. And I guess the blows were getting to him
Oh
because he said, stop yelling at me, I'm an adult, which
oh my God.
Oh,
it hit me like I'm getting the better of this guy. So I opened the passenger door and I pushed him and he rolls out. And I shut the door, lock it, jump in the driver's seat and take off. It took me like probably about 40 minutes to get out of the neighborhood because I kept, Jersey has a lot of low.
Oh yeah.
So I just kept going around and around trying to get out of there.
Awful. And your adrenaline's pumping.
My girl,
and the worst thing is you could have lost your freaking life over a stack of paper towels. Not a glorious way to go.
I should have just popped the brakes and just ran out, said, screw it, it's not my truck.
Yeah, paper towels. Who fucking cares? I mean,
but, under such situations, you never know how you're going to react. And
that's true.
You reacted maybe the best case scenario because you're alive still, and you got him out and you saved the fucking truck.
The second worst thing, the second craziest thing that ever happened to me, I drove off a hill.
Wait a minute. Now, wait a second. Let's hear that.
I almost tipped over, but luckily the truck, the trailer, it pivots at the fifth wheel, and the trailer pivoted down and stopped the drive wheels from driving. So I was on the side of a hill, almost at a 45-degree.
Dangling.
Yeah.
Where was that?
That was in Pennsylvania.
Just what? Slip road?
Somewhere between. No, I hit some mud. I went off a little bit to the side to do something, and I hit some mud, and it just kept sliding. I was going too fast for slowing down.
Okay.
Well, you're still going.
You're still alive.
Yeah, I had to get a tow truck to get me out of that situation. And they were like, look, man, chances are you're going to have to drive to steer the tires, but I'm sorry to tell you, chances are you're going to flip. But I didn't. So I was like, and you
might be the perfect candidate for ice road truckers. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like full of luck.
I mean, that is just one of the most terrifying experiences that I cannot ever imagine doing myself. But thank you for delivering our products to us.
Well,
yeah, you're very
you started doing it.
Hold on, I have a question. This is not scientific, but just through your experience, what state cops harass you the most?
I don't think there's really one. I would say California, because the truck speed limit is so low, and there's so many laws. You have to have. You ever see? You know how you see the trucks with the two big pipes coming out the top?
Yep.
That's all illegal now. They're for show. The exhaust now comes out from the bottom.
Okay, so, interesting.
If they see smoke coming out the top, they know that they're still connected to the exhaust. They'll pull you over and ticket you for that. So there's so much that they'll ticket you for.
It's funny because I've only rolled with truckers a couple times, and one of them, this is not about me.
I've only rolled a trucker a couple of times, Tim. I've only rolled a trucker a couple of times.
One of them pulled a gun out on me, but one of them pulled a gun on me. Oh yeah, that's a whole other story. It's not about me, but I'll tell you another time. It was a bad situation, but he did tell me before the gun was pulled out when we were kind of getting along. He said California is the worst state to drive a truck in. So yeah. I think that's pretty much the universal thought amongst truckers.
Yeah, 100%. Everybody hates California.
I'm gonna ask this: are there any routes that you just really enjoy being on, or are you just trying to get the job done? Like, yeah, I want that route.
Oh no, I enjoy I-68 goes through Maryland. That's beautiful. But
interesting.
I-86 that goes through New York. That's beautiful. But
I know that one.
The most beautiful is I-70 from Utah to Denver. All of Utah and then half of Colorado. That's probably the most beautiful highway anyone will ever drive.
It's like lunar, right? I mean, it's such a beautiful part of the planet.
Yeah. And then when you get into Colorado, suddenly you start seeing all the evergreen and all that stuff, and it takes you through, I believe I-70 is the highest interstate at like 11,000 feet. So I love it. It's that section.
So, yeah. So punk rocking, fanzine making. So how did you first start doing your you do your fanzine, and then how do you get a hold of people? And was it in Miami? Yeah, Miami is when you started doing your first musical stuff, right?
Yeah.
And what was that?
Doing punk rock, doing hardcore, and the fanzines, all thanks to stuff like MRR, Flipside. Used to remember in the back they had classifieds. Just try to do a lot of pen pals. Just try to
we used to do that, people. Yeah.
Tape trading, videotape trading.
Who were some of the bands you liked at that point before you got more industrial more on the industrial tip?
I have actually always been into industrial music. I was the only kid that I hung out with in the punk scene that would talk about bands like Neubauten.
Right.
I also liked Current 93,
right, like
that, Coil, and nobody I knew actually listened to that stuff.
Because were there any like American industrial bands at that point? I'm not sure. I think most of that came out of the UK, Germany.
I would say so, but there were a few. I forgot some of the names, like Sleep Chamber. I think they were out of Massachusetts. Okay. Of course, Crash Worship was from LA.
I mean, I think of Survival Research Laboratories, but not.
Oh, there you go, Survival Research. Yeah,
bigger than music itself.
Yeah, that's way more than just music. But yeah, I would say it's way more European than American. Yeah.
So when you came to me, and I love when, I'm so happy that you did approach me. It was when you had just completed your Memento Mori album, which is music created by using human bones. Where did you get these bones? If you can reveal.
So when I lived in Brooklyn, I was managing a tattoo studio in Manhattan on First, right off of St. Mark's, called Infernum. Really good tattoo artist called Leorcifer. He does mostly dark art. So people tend to give him like bones and stuff as gifts.
Right.
And I had already done about, I'd say like 3 releases. And I used to sit at the desk manning the computer and the phones and stuff. And a lot of times he had a femur, and I would sit there and hit it against my hand, just like cops do with their batons. And I realized, wait a second, I should actually try to use some of this stuff to make music, because I was already doing mostly percussive music. So I think something with all human bones would be pretty interesting. It took forever to record. I started recording in 2012. I didn't finish till almost 2015 because a lot of the bones that I had, I borrowed them from Leor. I would go from Manhattan back to Brooklyn, either having them in a bag or in a shopping bag, a book bag, something like that. Always afraid of getting stopped and them asking, all right, what's in the bag? Open up this bag with a skull and stuff in it. He was kind enough to lend me like quite a number of human bones. And
if you want to do the follow-up with animal bones, I have a vast collection. I'm just letting you know.
Okay, I could do one with animal bones for sure. So after a while, I started getting tired of taking all these things to the subway, but also I didn't just record at home. I recorded on subway platforms because when you hit bones together, they don't
dead sound.
it's you just get the same sound over and over, this clack. Yeah. So I need different sounds without doing as many effects, layered effects and stuff. So I started recording in tunnels and on platforms, out in open fields, and I didn't want his stuff to get confiscated. So after a while, I started buying my own, going to oddity shops and things like that, and getting my own collection, and finally finished it up a little bit in early 2015. Got it mastered by James Plotkin.
Oh yes.
Got it pressed on vinyl. Was going to get it on 45 RPM, but there was a happy accident. The pressing plant calls me up and says, hey, it might be, I think this will sound better on 33. And I was like, let me think about it. And when I was thinking about it, I realized if I get it pressed on 45, oh no, he told me it will sound better on 45 because I was going to do it on 33. So I thought about it and I said, if it's pressed on 45, you could play it on 33 and get a much different sound. So it'd be like, instead of 9 songs, it's like 18 songs. Because since there's no vocals or anything like that, it's not warping anything that would diminish the sound. So I thought, actually, that's perfect. I'm going to go with pressing it at 45 and kind of got a double record out of it.
Interesting. Going back to the different bones kind of sounding the same, I would imagine, though, the different size bones would sound different. There'd be a different pitch. Like,
nope.
They're still flat and dead sounding.
It really surprised me. That's what I thought, too. I thought because the skull is hollow, when you hit a skull, you'd get more of a clunk. But they don't vibrate.
So a femur and a tibula, it's the same.
It's going to be the same. It might be a little lighter in sound because you're going to hit the tibula different than you're going to hit a femur. But it's basically, you pretty much get the same clacking sound.
Okay. So
they're dead. It sounds dead.
So you're never going to so you can't do a clave rhythm with Afro-Cuban clave rhythm with
I wouldn't say so. Yeah, no. So then after I recorded like the percussive stuff, I thought, this is kind of dull. So I started trying to look into more things that I could do with human bones. And, of course, there's the Tibetan thigh bone trumpet. So I used that. And I actually had to make bone whistles to get whistling sounds as well. That took just when I finally got my hands on the clanging, which is the Tibetan thigh trumpet, it took me almost 6 months to learn how to get the sound out of it. So that's another thing right there that took a while. The whistles, it took me forever to make them. I had to destroy like 2 femurs just to make them. So
you could have had one trick that was the grinding of bones, but I don't know what you'd grind them with.
yeah, I did the grinding because I had when I broke the femurs up, I got to scrape them against each other, and that did make different sound. So I did.
Speaking of creating things, I mean, I was very interested in the discipline of the sex lives of the primitives, which was discipline, and you had made these very unusual, quote unquote, sex toys.
Oh yeah.
What were those made of? Those were very unique.
Only natural products. It was basically called Discipline. It was an art project of all natural sex products that you would think that the primitives would use. So basically, I used handmade rope, wood, of course. There's a tree called the silk floss that grows spikes all over it. So I used the spikes from the silk floss.
For those hardcore sex lovers.
Yeah. So that's basically it. Just all I try to use natural glue. I used antlers, deer antlers, crow feathers.
How many pieces did you make? And was this an exhibition or was this
it was on exhibition in I think 2015. The art show was called New York Babylon. It was a group show. I believe it was at a gallery in Brooklyn called Fitness. I'm not sure they're still around. But yeah, I think that they were in another show, but it slips my mind. I don't recall, but they were in one. I haven't done anything lately from that series, but
because you're always moving on to other projects.
Exactly. Everything I do for a while, and then I find my fancy somewhere else. And
I completely understand your theory of evolution and revolution.
That's how art goes.
So I mean, you've done a lot of. I love that you've done some books, and the one thing, especially the Hidden City, a tour of New York City's esoteric side. So is that one reason that you're in Detroit now? I mean, oh my God, there's so much to explore, but it's also terrifying. I mean, look, you take a chance whenever you go into abandoned, deserted locations.
Oh yeah,
anywhere, but especially in Detroit. So you had this book, which was pretty great because it did highlight a lot of unusual places that you seem to seek out.
That's one of the things that I really enjoy. I enjoy going
excavating.
Exactly. But not just excavating, but also going to check out the things that a lot of people aren't aware of. Because some of them, they're public places, like the building where the Triangle Waste Fire was at. That's right in the village, the West Village. So there's a lot of things a lot of places even that people in New York go all the time, but they don't realize where they're at. Like
what the history is of it.
Exactly. Like behind the New York Public Library is Bryant Park. That's a potter's field. Everyone is sitting there picnicking on top of dead bodies, and very few people know that. Then there's a lot of places that were abandoned and were very cool to look at. And then there were other places that people just walk by every day and don't realize are there.
Well, I mean, in any city, but especially in New York, I mean, the buried and the ghost of things and people are literally littered every step you take.
Yes. And it's unbelievable how sometimes you'll walk down the street and you'll see that it's paved with asphalt, and then some of the asphalt breaks away and you'll see the railroad tracks that are under there that have been there since like the late 1800s. And it's pretty amazing how stuff is been built on top of stuff, and a lot of it's hidden, but if you look for it, you will.
Yeah, and a lot of it in New York is, I mean, that small earthquake we had like last week, just a 2.2, no biggie, mainly in Hudson.
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah, New York is not adverse to an occasional small earthquake. The thing is, the infrastructure here is so old, and at any time, like most of America, actually, because we don't spend money on things that are important. We spend money on bullshit, like giving tax breaks to rich cunts and paying the salaries of people that should not be in office of politics or corporations. So therefore, it shall all just crumble eventually. And New York is also sinking 1 to 2. It's sinking because, and this is what I've questioned this before, like, why hasn't the planet imploded from all of the cement on it? And now actually my theory is proven that New York is sinking.
It's headed there, that's for sure.
So one big fucking rumble and down we go. I mean, I know Tim loves to scuba dive. I'll see you under the East River.